to Citizens Forum. This is being filmed on Tuesday, May the 12th. In the Memorial Arena in Victoria, BC, I'd like to start by thanking the volunteer crew and the Shaw staff that makes this program happen. The first part of Citizens Forum is always the Walter and Jack Show. So I'll start off with Elizabeth May. Elizabeth May is all over the media. Everyone is aghast, they say. And here's the Times columnist. They're not the worst, but here's the Times columnist today, Tuesday, May the 12th. And the headline says, May apologizes for her off-color speech. And of course, the media is all over her on this one. It's big news. It's probably international news. Now, I picked this up, it's from Elizabeth May. This is the spring newsletter that she sends out to all her constituents. It's all about Bill C-51. It's all about Bill C-51. And funny, none of this was told to us by the corporate media. But something happens at a press gallery fun night. And you know, Walter, it struck me as I was walking over here, I wonder if this is one of the first acts of the new Bill C-51, because now we've created a secret police force who can target people who are opposed to corporate Canada. And when Elizabeth May goes after Bill C-51, she becomes an enemy. And would it be impossible for somebody to slip a little something into her drink and then make a big thing out of it in all of the corporate-owned media as if it was really important, when all the important issues that Elizabeth May talks about, and all of us try to talk about, don't really get a lot of coverage in that same media?
I mean, I haven't had a chance to read. I haven't read that much, you know, words in the Times columnist ever. Like there's the first page, the second page, and editorial page. I didn't read any of it. Apparently she dropped the F-bomb, Jack.
Oh my God, can you imagine how horrified the media must be about that?
Could you imagine how many times some off-color language occurred at the press gallery dinner?
Yeah.
You know, really? Is that a story? So it's really too bad.
Here's one thing Elizabeth May said in the newsletter she sent out, and it's a list of some of the people who say that, who are opposed to Bill C-51. And it's funny that this also never really got promoted in the media. Joe Clark stood against Bill C-51, Jean Chrétien, John Turner, and Paul Martin all stood against Bill C-51. We the public were never told this by our media. Former Justice of the Supreme Court of Canada, Louise Arbour, Michel Bastarache, Ian Binney, Claire Dubé, and John Major, 5 former justices on the Supreme Court of Canada, were never told this by our media. Legal experts from the University of Ottawa Law School, University of Toronto Law School, and they even say some media stood against it, although I must have missed that. So the media betrays us, they fail us, and then they manipulate us by going after Elizabeth May.
Yeah, the coverage is something like, you know, the bombing plot on the legislature lawn. It's about that quality of coverage. They just latch onto something that might look.
And people believe it, and I don't blame people. You know, they're very
effective.
effective.
You know, but I tell you, Jack, Elizabeth's doing great work. She's putting out that paper, which is great. She's covering it herself. It's too bad the federal NDP hasn't really gone to bat. Although it opposes Bill C-51, it doesn't appear that they've really made much of that. And also their opposition to what's happening in the Eastern Mediterranean, Syria and Iraq. You know, the NDP aren't really vociferous, you know, about that. So it's too bad. And they're leaving lots of very fertile political ground wide open for Elizabeth May to come in. I think the NDP could get a terrible shock in the next election if they're walking in thinking that they're going to pull off another Alberta style election and just get coronated. It's not the same. Politics are not the same federally. You have to earn your vote. And when Elizabeth really comes out that clear on those issues, she's representing Canadians. And most Canadian values really are reflected in her views, and I think the Greens could really take off if the NDP don't wise up.
Well, you know, she's taken a hit from the corporate media this week and the people who run the country. It's up to us. You know, we've got to build the democracy that I think all of us want, and part of that is building the media that we all want, because we sure don't have anything. For example, I got the numbers from Alberta. So NDP sweep, you know, it's a tornado, big change. The NDP got 41% of the vote and won 54 of, I think, 87 seats. So 41% of the vote, and they got a substantial majority. Wild Rose got 24% of the vote, got 21 seats. And the Progressive Conservatives actually got more votes than Wild Rose. They got 28% compared to 24. And they won 10 seats compared to 21. So what happened was the voting system that we use in Canada did not give the people of Alberta the government they elected. They voted for something very different. What they got was the manipulation of a very poor voting system that we have because the people who run the country like it. It works well for them. The NDP would not be in power if I mean, they destroyed Alison Redford to start with over nothing. And then, you know, Jim Prentice took the fall, and now the NDP comes in. I don't think that can happen without.
Well, there's been so much manipulation in Alberta politics, and is that a surprise? Look at it out here. Look how wacky our politics are. Try to figure it out. I've been here for 30 years and still I can't figure it out. So, but in Alberta, you know, you get that case where the numbers are terrible. Oh, by the way, you know, the NDP could bring in proportional representation in Alberta.
Right.
That is the platform of the federal party. I think they've mentioned it here in British Columbia.
Yes. It's the policy here too.
Is it? That surprised me. But now there's a chance. This is exactly a good chance. Let the public have fair government.
Yeah. So once again, the people of Alberta voted for basically a coalition government, and it could have been NDP PC, it could have been PC Wild Rose, it could have been anything, and you know, but they didn't vote for an NDP majority government. That's what they got, and it's a big problem for the country because our voting system doesn't give us what we vote for. Have you got a topic, or you want me to carry on?
No, I'll just follow what you're doing so well.
Yeah. Omar Khadr, Harper was on television, newspaper, radio, and basically, I don't know if I've got his exact words, but Mr. Harper said of Omar Khadr that we know that he pled guilty to serious crimes, including murder. And Mr. Harper was all over the media saying this, and the media presented this as if it were true. They allowed Mr. Harper to make the statement over and over again. And it divides Canadians because a lot of people believe he did plead guilty to these crimes and murder. And in fact, he did plead guilty. But what they don't tell you is the story. And the story is that Omar Khadr was told that, and I believe I have the facts right, I may be off by a year or so, but he was told that if he pled guilty, he would get 8 years and he would be sent to Canada. And if he didn't plead guilty, he would spend the rest of his life in Guantanamo, and when Guantanamo shuts down, he'd be sent to some prison in the States, and he'd never get out of prison. So that was the deal. And for Mr. Harper and the media to tell us that Omar Khadr pled guilty to these crimes without telling us the truth is just an example of why our country is just doing so many wrong things, because we're being lied to from the top constantly.
You know, you get lied to so much that you get desensitized about when they lie to you. Like I heard that too. I didn't, you know, it kind of ruffled me a bit, but when you really start to dissect it, you realize there's an agenda here. I mean, somebody's writing all the lines, Jack, for all those guys. You know, they have an agenda, and it's so clear that, you know, what threat is this particular person to Canadian society? He was taken to, was it in Syria that the event happened?
No, it was in Afghanistan.
Afghanistan.
But imagine a soldier being arrested and thrown in prison
Yeah.
A soldier arrested and thrown in prison for shooting or injuring or killing somebody else in a war. I mean, has that ever happened? How can the Americans do it?
It's so strange, and the whole thing is so odd. But look at Harper. Look at this new anti-terror thing they're on. It's a total fabrication. We know it. It's just a total. George Orwell. I don't know what he would do. Be doing backflips in his grave. He would never have thought how far they would have taken this. So it's nothing new about these guys. Fortunately, Cotter has been released.
Yeah, for him.
So,
that's great.
and I think this is so important. There's a chance for him to have a life, and I really wish him the best because he's gone through a lot.
Yeah, I agree. And I was talking to a friend just a day or two ago who didn't know that Bill C-51 had passed. He's interested. He kind of follows what's happening in the country, but they've kept it so well hidden that probably a lot of people don't know that Bill C-51 was passed. It passed, I think, last Wednesday. A sad day for Canada, I think. And basically, we moved on.
I think it's a watershed moment. I really believe that legislation is going to totally dismantle. Well, of course, they probably know this. Harper and that regime probably know that's the end, and this is their last bit of legislation. They're going to disappear. It rubs so many people the wrong way. Every political party. How are they going to survive this one, Jack? I think this is the thing that people really start to look at and really start to question and wonder, how do we get this far into this whole terrorist scare in Canada and all these fake bombings and all this stuff? Most people look at that and, there's something wrong.
No, I think a lot of people don't think anything's wrong. A lot of people believe, for example, the 9/11 official story. I don't believe the official 9/11 story. It started with that. We moved on into a war on Iraq, which a murderous terrorist war carried out by an imperialist bunch of insane lunatics who run the United States. But, I mean, does anybody on TV ever say that? And now, out of all of that comes ISIS. I mean, you can see the creation of ISIS if you look at what they actually did. And they've taken us here in order to create the fear to allow for Bill C-51. And Bill C-51 is there to protect the corporations. It's not there to protect us.
Yeah, maybe I'm being a little too hopeful. But, what is going to happen to wake people up is the question. I mean, this is a pretty big deal.
We need a media. We need a media that can take them on, their own manipulative, lying, pathetic, because they're good at what they do. I mean, I believed the media when I grew up. I certainly believed every bit of it.
Harper spent a couple $100 million on this war in Syria and Iraq now. It's a lot of money. Where does he get the mandate to do that, Jack? Like, our people really were clamoring to send troops, and he had to respond to the public outcry?
That's a very good question. How does our dictator do these things? And he does them because he has this full support of the people who run the country, and they own the media.
Yeah, so there he was in Syria or someplace recently, snuck in the country and got up within 100 kilometers of the front.
Oh, he was in Iraq.
Iraq. The thing is that, is that what we want our leader to be doing? There's a huge catastrophe in Nepal, and now there's been another earthquake today. Shouldn't our government be spending time on real emergencies, on real humanitarian aid, and, kind of get out of the killing business in some war that nobody, there's no need for them to be there at all?
Yeah, they're taking us down very dangerous roads based on lies. What you said about the story of the Harper government's ties to the girls that were smuggled from London to join ISIS in Syria. I mean, there's a direct connection to Stephen Harper and the Canadian government, but nobody will report it.
I know, it's so shocking. when I first read it, I checked as much as I could that story, and it held up. It was reported in the mainstream media. Harper's right-hand man, Bruno Sacamani, who became his ambassador to Jordan, was running a smuggling ring through Syria into through Turkey into Syria. I mean, it's a pretty direct line here. This would take a government down, you know, in midterm.
But in Canada, nobody even knows. Nobody's told.
That's really wild. But they're not talking about it.
Here's something else that they're not talking about, the genetic contamination of our entire food supply. But in Vermont, the state of Vermont passed a law saying that they were going to start to label genetically contaminated foods beginning July of next summer, so July 2016. They were sued by Monsanto, I guess, and all the corporate food business in the United States. They've withstood the first challenge, so a court ruled that they can proceed. I assume Monsanto and the boys will take this to the Supreme Court of America if they can. And nothing in the media. Like, we're not told because they don't want us knowing that there is a place in the United States that is standing up and saying we want genetically engineered foods labeled. We're not allowed to be told that. And once again, it's the media.
Yeah, there was a case in Quebec about 10 years ago about the cosmetic use of pesticides. And the small city in Quebec, Hudson, Quebec, they were sued by Monsanto, and they won. And they won the right for all municipalities across this country to regulate the use of cosmetic pesticides. And we didn't have that until they took that case on. It cost a couple $1 million. The Sierra Legal Defense Fund took it on and went to the Supreme Court. So, I mean, good things can happen, even at municipal levels, you know, and that's an important thing for people to remember, that the laws are written in certain ways, but there's always, you know, a good, keen legal mind can interpret them in a way that's favorable for the public.
Yeah, in that case, too, I mean, we should have, we should have congratulated ourselves hugely for taking on the chemical industry and beating them in Hudson, Quebec. But instead, we were never told. You know, the law sort of came into being. They deny us our victories. And until we have our own media, they'll continue to deny us our victories. We won't even know about them. I just want to read this about the pharmaceutical boys. You know, vaccinations, trust us, we're good. Believe the pharmaceutical industry when they tell you that vaccinations are safe and effective. I don't think they are, but at least we should see the proof, which they don't tell us. And all of their other drugs. I mean, and plus their control of the entire Canadian medical system. The Canadian medical system, I think, is controlled by the pharmaceutical industry. I saw this a few months ago, and I actually read it once before, but I just want to read it again. Fritz Termeer, found guilty of slavery and mass murder at Auschwitz. He was found guilty, I guess, by the Nuremberg trials, served only 7 years in prison, and when released, became chairman of the board of Bayer, one of the world's largest pharmaceutical companies. So that's what we're up against. I mean, these guys are tough.
Other than that, he's a pretty good guy, Jack, you know. Torturer, what the heck, you know.
I'm going to have to dig deeper into the pile.
Well, I could bring something up
Okay,
slightly associated with pharmaceutical thing. Adrian Dix was talking last week in the legislature about the case with the fired workers that were doing the research on the smoking cessation drugs, and right when they were just about ready to release those studies, the Christy Clark regime shut them down and said they were using private information inappropriately and stuff like that, and shut down their study.
So this was the 7 people who were fired?
They were all fired. All eventually were settled out of court except for one party, I think. So it was all trumped up. It was all a big fat lie. But Adrian Dick spent 2 hours in the legislature, apparently, raking over those coals. But he never brought up the research. Nobody really knows why Christy Clark and these guys attacked them. And they were doing research on smoking cessation. And the thing is about these big companies is they hate to see a bad report, Jack, anywhere in the world. And I think that's what happened here. The Liberals helped out their buddies by shutting down that study, and we're probably never going to see any of that research.
And just before I came, there was a guest on CFAX. I was listening to CFAX talking about essentially poverty in Victoria and how Christy Clark and her buddies are making it so difficult, even for people who are entitled to welfare and some support. It's getting more and more difficult for them to even access it. It's all computer and telephone, wait half an hour, and it's another attack on the poor. Take from the poor, give to the rich. I mean, that's Christy Clark, and that's our province.
Yeah, I mean, people are disadvantaged when they need these sort of services. They're not on their game a lot of the time. And they have to have the brains of a lawyer to get to fill out the forms to be eligible for the benefits. So a bit of a catch-22 there.
It was the Together Against Poverty Society, and they just said their office was being inundated with people who can't get through the system anymore. You know, we've got to do better. We can do better. We need media. We need democracy. Thank you, Walter.
Always a pleasure, Jack.
And thank you for watching this segment of Citizens Forum. Welcome to segment 2 of Citizens Forum, being filmed on Tuesday, May the 12th. Our guest in this segment is Laura Weileby, and we're going to be talking about an upcoming event called the March Against Monsanto. The March Against Monsanto. It's on Saturday, May the 23rd at the Ledge, starting around 12:30.
Yeah, 12:30, 12:45, yeah.
I mean, Monsanto is one of the worst. So, Laura, you want to start off by talking about because we eat this stuff every day. You can't avoid it. They're forcing it down our throats. You want to start by talking about the safety of genetically contaminated foods or whatever.
That's right. It's in about maybe 75% or more of the processed food that we shop for in the grocery store. And we eat every day. If you're buying the box stuff, you're buying the produce stuff, then that's what you're getting. First of all, when it comes down to the proponents of GMOs, the scientists and the people that are making their money off it, they'll tell you on one hand that, you know, it's perfectly safe. It's substantially the same as regular organic fare. You don't have to worry about eating it. It's really not much different, you know. And then on the other hand, they tell you that, well, we really feel that our man-made creation is so unique that it deserves a patent. So we want to patent it. So how can you say that one thing is substantially the same and unique enough to warrant a patent on the other hand? I mean, when a bug bites into a BT corn, a genetically modified corn, it dies. When it bites into a regular organic fare that's been around for thousands and thousands of years, forever, it doesn't. That's a substantial enough difference right there.
So you mean genetically modified corn is made to include pesticide?
It's made to create its own pesticide.
And does it create its own pesticide?
It most certainly does. It's been very effective.
And so you mean, I guess I should know this, but when the bugs eat the corn,
they die. That's right. And you see the people who are spraying their crops with this big gas mask on, spraying the crops that we eat on a regular basis, and we're supposed to not be worried about this?
So they're spraying them, but plus the crop itself is...
That's right. There are two different kinds of genetically modified plants. One that is created to produce its own pesticide, where the bug bites into it, it automatically dies. And the second one is created to withstand heavy dousings of Roundup, which is their primary chemical is glyphosate. And the two are sold hand in hand by Monsanto. Monsanto sells the GMO seeds, and Monsanto sells the chemical Roundup that goes with them.
You gotta love them. So, okay, I mean, personally, I don't think they're safe. I try to avoid them as much as possible. I
Well-
wish they were labeled. I wish we didn't grow them. I wish they'd never been thought of.
Me as well. The FDA's own biotechnology task force, the Food and Drug Administration, their own task force, their internal scientists that they rely on for criteria, have made numerous reports in the past about the unsafeness of these GMO products and the need for them to be tested properly before they're released to the general public. There was a letter written by the head honcho himself, the FDA, warning not to let the GMOs loose on the general public. There was a letter signed one time by 815 world scientists, all concerned. This is to the governments concerning genetically modified organisms, and they're listing their concerns about the hazards of GMOs to biodiversity, food safety, human animal consumption, just about everything. There have been so many hundreds of others, people and the scientists and so forth that have come forth since then, and there's no way on earth that there's been a consensus among the scientific institutions that GMOs are safe. There never has been.
And yet here in Canada, the media doesn't report any of this, so we don't know about it or think about it too much, and the politicians allow them to stuff it down our throats.
That's because North America is home to these GMO giants, you know, the ones that are making all the money off it. Monsanto, Dow Chemicals, Coca-Cola, there's just so many of them. The European companies or countries have, you know, smartened up, and they've clicked into what's going on, and there's bans and rules against GMOs in over 60 countries in the world. Here in North America, we don't even have laws showing mandatory labeling. We don't even know we're eating them. We do, you know, people have always said, well, where's the science? You know, how do you prove that GMOs are problems and that? Well, now, as of this year, we have the world-renowned WHO, the World Health Organization, has come straight out and said that glyphosate is a probable carcinogen.
And glyphosate is the chemical that's sprayed on GMO crops.
Exactly, the number one ingredient in Roundup, that's right. And so, I mean, it's not the clear-cut black and white that we're all waiting to hear that, yes, it causes it, but if it probably does, and here we're using this all over the world, you know, spraying it on the crops, digesting it every day. I mean, this is some really important scientists that we've been waiting to hear anyways.
Yeah, we need, I mean, you know, my thing is always the media. The media has to do a better job of telling us these truths because we've got to fix them up. You wanted to talk about the illegality of GMOs.
Yeah, you know, the Food Additives Amendment of 1958, the Food Additives Amendment, it was created to protect the public from potentially harmful additives to food.
In Canada?
And this is from the States. This is where GMOs have come from. And this law specifically placed the burden of proof on the manufacturers of the food. It was up to them to prove that their food additives were safe before let loose on the general public, on the consumer. And the legal test, actually, is that the law must not only be overwhelming consensus present within the scientific community, that consensus cannot be based on hypotheses or speculation. It has to be based on solid evidence. There's never been any evidence that GMOs are safe. There's never been, where are the public tests, you know? There are none. So
yeah,
we
they broke the back of that law. That was a huge loss for us North Americans when that law was beaten down by the corporations because, you know, I think what you said was they had to prove that their food additives were safe. They don't have to prove that anymore. That's gone.
That's right. That was called the precautionary principle, which has basically been tossed out the window. There's a very interesting book that came out this year by Stephen Drucker. It's called Altered Genes and Twisted Truth. And he's actually sued the FDA at one time himself. So in doing so, it gained him access to their personal files on GMOs. And that's how he learned about all the internal workings of their scientists themselves and all the paperwork and all the words that they had to say themselves on that GMOs should not be released for public consumption yet. Um,
it's a sad tale for our nation and for us.
no, that's true. And you know, if you think about it, I mean, GMOs were illegal in 1992 when they first came out. They never passed the testing required to be
Because they said they were substantially exactly the same as regular food. Yeah. That
yeah,
was the
pretty
story.
much. And there were a lot of people that were trying to bolster the biotech industry along. And so
Big
they
business.
subverted a lot of the information that was necessary for that people knew about. And how they got away with it, it's really preposterous. But they were illegal. GMOs were illegal when they first came out, and they're still illegal today.
Let's talk a little bit about the march against Monsanto. So it's going to be Saturday, May the 23rd, legislature starting around 12:30.
Yes, yes, it will. I asked people to come at 12:30 in the past, and then I've been maybe sometimes 10 minutes late getting it started, and it's a long time to kind of wait around. So I'm asking people if you want to start gathering like 12:45-ish this time,
Oh,
and
okay.
hopefully I'll try and get the show right on the road at 1 o'clock.
Okay.
But it's going to be a really great day for raising awareness. We're going to have a march through the street from from the legislature down Government Street, back up Yates and down Douglas back to the legislature. There's going to be some really great guest speakers. We've got a band playing. We've got free organic food, free organic seeds.
Yeah, everybody should
I've got a
come out.
raffle happening this year. Like, what is there not to come out for? And every time I've done this so far, this will be the 4th march that I'm organizing. We've had great weather, just been awesome weather. So,
And I think we should just come out and stand against Monsanto. I mean, just doing that is worthwhile.
that's right. Raise your voices and be heard. Absolutely. We're planning on making some noise downtown today.
You know, you should consider doing, as part of the march, stop in front of the CTV building and CFAX and say, how come you guys never tell us about this stuff?
That's true. We could change the route up a little bit this time. We could mix it up.
That's where a big part of our problem is. So
They have been, in all fairness, they have been down in the past. I've been interviewed a few times by CTV in that, but not enough.
well, let's compare the amount of coverage they give to, I mean, anything. What happened in Baltimore? Mike Duffy. Let's compare the amount of coverage given to Mike Duffy and the amount of coverage that same media gives to the safety of the food we're eating.
That affects
right?
everybody on the planet.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
true.
It's pathetic. So yeah, let's. I just want to say the state of Vermont, once again, has passed a law that will go into effect in July 2016, saying that no more, they will label genetically engineered foods. And I heard that Chipotle, some company,
Yeah, there's a lot of restaurants
fast
that
food
are
restaurant?
they're jumping on board and they're going GMO free. Even around town, there are just dozens of places available now that support the organic community.
One at a time.
Yeah, it's a growing trend, and it looks going to keep on growing.
Thank you so much, and thank you especially for organizing the march for years. You should get a medal, maybe a Senate seat.
I don't think so. It's my privilege to do so.
Thanks for watching this segment of Citizens Forum. Welcome to segment 3 of Citizens Forum. Walter and Jack again, and we're going to be talking about sewage treatment, and we're going to try and do that every week, at least for a while. So Walter and I have gone to a few meetings. I heard Stu Young of Langford on the radio yesterday. He just mentioned a few points that were very interesting. I think he said, I'm putting words in his mouth, but I think I'm correct, and if I'm incorrect, I apologize. But I think he said that Citerra is still getting $120,000 a month for doing basically, I don't know if they're doing anything, but we are paying them $120,000 a month.
Citerra is the firm that was going to build the one big sewage treatment plant, and they're basically on retainer now while they're waiting to get a job, apparently.
Yeah, and they were going to oversee the building. I think that's what it was. I think Mayor Stu Young also said that McLaughlin Point is still on the official paperwork from the CRD, and I think I'm getting this right. I think he said because basically the staff won't take it off, and they keep saying if we change the name, we're going to lose some funding. I think I'm saying what he said. So the official paperwork, McLaughlin Point, is still there.
Red flags are waving.
Yeah. And he also said, I think, that just before Esquimalt voted down the proposal to build the sewage treatment plant at McLaughlin Point, the CRD signed or agreed to some requests for proposals for people to build the plant at McLaughlin Point. And each one of those has moved ahead because we signed the request for proposal, and they're each getting paid, I think he said, $250,000 to come up with a plan to build something at McLaughlin Point. And I think he said, you know, this isn't just a few $1,000s. This is going to cost us, I got the impression, in the neighborhood of $1 million for that too.
So it's the same guys that are still at it. They're the same people that made the big mistake the first time, that Mayor Desjardins and Esquimalt Council saved us from a fiasco. But it doesn't, we're not sure. We have to have a little bit of hope, and bless all the people that are trying to figure this out. But there still seems to be in the mix a lot of the old crowd.
Yes.
And it doesn't seem that they've learned much of a lesson here. They're just planning on going ahead with some big treatment plant, as far as we can tell.
And we don't know. I think one or two plants may still be in the game.
Yeah.
Or many smaller plants using a distributed model. But we were just saying that if it's going to be smaller plants, how big are they? Are they the size of a house, or are they much, much bigger? Is stuff underground? Because now they've come up with the locations, and a lot of them are in the city's parks, Beacon Hill Park, various parks around the city. And so I think people are going to, and there's a time constraint, we're told. So how are decisions being made?
It's so hard for the public to engage. Like we're trying to engage
Yes.
with them. You and I have been at these meetings, and it's almost impossible to make any meaningful recommendations. They have public relations people all over those meetings. The first one we went to, there's about 75 either PR people or politicians there. They numbered over half of the whole crowd. I mean, it was just amazing how we were being managed. Every table had a public relations person to shape your words into a more positive phrase or whatever. But in the end, I tried twice, and I absolutely could not get anything. They wouldn't write anything down, basically. And they wrote it down, but when they get up to report at the mic, they made up stuff that nobody said, as far as I could tell. So it's really too bad that they're allowing that process to go on. That's a sham. Even if they're well-meaning, I don't think they should be insulting the public to this degree. Why not get on with it, come up with some sites, come up with a plan that we can look at. Yeah. They're asking us to design the sewage treatment.
We should know the technologies. I think on the west side site, if anybody goes to, I don't know what the website is, it should be well known, but there is a little talk there about technology. But I mean, how big, how effective? Are they quiet? Are they perfectly quiet, 100% quiet? Are they 100% odor-free? What happens to the neighbors? I mean, all of these are things we should just know, and this has been like a 7-year-long or longer process now, and none of these things...
Well, they hid a lot of technology away from us. They didn't want us to consider smaller scale, more distributed sort of model of sewage treatment, which appears to be the sensible way to go. So the CRD always shunned that model towards the one big sewage treatment plant. That's where they can, I think, where the big money can be made. I heard that Halifax's one big sewage treatment plant has failed, and it's been down for about a year. So don't you think they should be looking at what happened to Halifax, a port city, with many of the same issues, more or less the same population, and they can't make their sewage treatment work. You know, it just seems to be just beyond the pale, Jack. I mean, I hate to be so to distrust this at this level, but I just do not feel that they're going into this in the right manner. We should be stepping back from this sewage treatment issue and look at the governance issues of this region and all the problems with nepotism and the NDP liberal mafia running these municipal councils. And we got so many problems. We can't solve a problem like this. We don't have any governance structure to do it. You know, is the CRD really the right organization to be running the show? Where did they get their mandate? From appointed municipal councilors, apparently. But I don't think those councils are going to the CRD with all these great ideas. I think it's coming the other way. I think the CRD has an agenda, and they are pushing it through.
Yeah, I don't know even what to suggest people can do if anybody's interested in at least finding out what's going on. I mean, you can certainly contact your city councilors because this is big. We're still looking at hundreds of millions of dollars, possibly $1 billion. You know, it's a big project, and we can't afford to make a mistake. We've got to make sure we have a good technology, that we get a good environmental benefit, and that we do it at a good price.
Yeah, you know,
The old CRD plan was the exact opposite of that. It was no environmental benefit for $1 billion.
Yeah.
So we've got to do better with this plan.
yeah, we might be in transition right now, and I'm always trying to pull myself back from being too negative about this stuff. There might be something happening there that we're not aware of.
And so you're saying there might be something that's actually good happening right now with this process.
It might be,
Yeah,
but
it might
we're
be.
having a hard time finding it, that's all. And I really think that we're going to wallow in these indecisiveness for a long time until we really have some type of organizational structure in this region that can make these decisions democratically. For instance, we should always mention that once they come up with a design, it should go to a referendum. Just like you know, the public transport in Vancouver went to a referendum.
Yeah, I think the public should have a final say.
We gotta have a
not
say
on whether
here.
or not we have sewage treatment, but certainly on the plan that they choose. We've got to have the ability
Yeah, I
to
mean,
stop them if we
obviously they came up with a plan there on taxation base or something. I think that should be presented to the public. Do you want to spend this amount of money on this sewage treatment system? Because otherwise, there's no way that they can actually have a mandate, because they just simply don't right now.
It looks like fairly important decisions are going to be made fairly quickly, though, and I'm not sure when I say that. I did contact the CRD, I think about a week ago now, and I asked the CRD, what are the timelines? Like, when are decisions going to be made? And as far as I know, I still haven't heard back, and that's important. When are final decisions going to be made? I think we should at least know that, and I've tried to find out, and I don't think I've been able to. I mean, I've never heard back on that question.
Well, we're almost out of time, but I think is that the funding is very intriguing how the federal funding works, part of which is coming from PPP Canada, private-public partnership. And you could add a whole lot of other phrases to describe this, but it looks like it's the way the corporate world gets their hands right in onto government money very readily. And those are the guys that are holding up some of this money, apparently. But it's very hard to know for sure. We were talking about that at the meeting on Saturday, and I was asking for some source material and stuff like that. I think we have a right to know who has been contacted there, what's the wording of these letters.
You mean in terms of the time pressure?
Yeah, if they
there
really
really
do
a
have a
time pressure?
deadline, like they're putting a gun to our heads and saying, okay, you got to make this decision. Well, we don't know what to do. Well, you got to make a decision. You know, that's just about the worst thing in the world you could ever do to the public. If you want to lose trust, do that to them. And that's what they're doing to us right now with this as far as I'm concerned, a fake deadline. I haven't seen the evidence that it's real.
I agree with you, and yet at the same time, we both feel that maybe there is going to be a
Well,
good
this
process.
is
You
it.
don't know.
I mean,
Yeah.
I hope I wake up and it all is a bad dream, but I don't think it is. I think we're going to continue on with this mess.
And a bad dream, but and we hope we're going to end up with a good thing. But I think it's important that we make sure we know what's going on. Yeah. Okay, we'll do it again next week. Thank you very much, and Walter, thank you.
See you next week, Jack.
Thanks for watching this sewage special on Citizens Forum. Welcome to the last segment of Citizens Forum, being filmed in the Memorial Arena in Victoria, BC on Tuesday, May the 12th. I'd like to thank again the volunteer crew and the Shaw staff that makes the show happen. Our guest in this segment is Mazin Al Nahawi, and we're going to be talking about Al Nakba, which is the catastrophe. So thank you, Mazin.
Thanks, Jack. This coming Friday, it's the 15th of May, which is Remembrance Day for Palestinian for Al Nakba, which, as you said, mean catastrophe. And the problem is in the same day, it's a celebration day for the colonial settlers who occupied Palestine, and now they call it the Israeli state.
So it's the anniversary of Israel.
The independence,
yeah.
which is actually was only just the theft of the Palestinian land, expelling almost more than half the population. Imagine a country, half of its population became refugee to make a place for European colonial settler, but many of them at that time, as you know, the Holocaust issue is also, it's part of that. So because of the Holocaust, Palestinians ended up paying for the crime which European did. So instead of Germany, for example, cut a piece of land and give it to and create a Jewish state, because for what they did to their Jewish citizen, the Arabs and who are ending up giving a big chunk of their land. Actually, Palestine, it's in the size of New Jersey, and that it was in 1948. The word catastrophe, it's really important here, and as in the previous interview, I mentioned that Einstein himself said the same word, and Einstein, in a letter he sent in the 10th of April in 1948, just 35 days before Al Nakba, he said the following: when a real and final catastrophe should befall us in Palestine, the first responsible for it would be the British, and the second responsible for it, the terrorist organizations built up from our own ranks. He's talking about Jews in that case. I am not willing to see anybody associated with these misled and criminal people. Einstein was not a unique case. The majority of Jewish Orthodox are against the Israeli apartheid in Palestine. It does not fit with the Torah or with the rest of their religion. And we don't need to forget that the Zionist movement itself was a secular movement. So to carry the banner of Judaism is kind of another awkward things here.
It's almost, I mean, you know, it's almost as if a part of the reason for World War II was to murder the Jews, not allow them to go anywhere except into Palestine, and create a sort of puppet state of whoever's running the world in order to destabilize that region and just create a problem, which is exactly what it did.
I'm going to mention just a small example to show the hypocrisy, especially of the U.S. The U.S. built a museum for the Holocaust in Washington, D.C., and actually on the top of an area was belonged to indigenous nation, Konowe Nation, which was decimated and slaughtered by the British in 1623. On the same spot, they built a museum for the Holocaust. Now we need to remember that the Americans themselves sent money to Hitler.
Sent money
Their
to Hitler.
corporation, they aided Hitler. They were all the way working with them until when the Britain suddenly decided to go to war, then the Canada and the US followed. But for in the beginning, Hitler and Mussolini, like in case of Mussolini, he was getting paid from he was 22 years old by the IM5, the
MI5.
intelligence Britain. They gave them money to when he was a radical young. The same thing to Hitler. They manufacture all these Nazi and fascist state. And later, they build a museum for the Holocaust. If they learn anything about the Holocaust, they will know that never again it's for everyone, not for a certain group of people, and the rest you continue doing the same old colonial policy. So coming back to Palestine, the main issue in Palestine, it's as we say, it's settler colonialism, and it's a very unique colonial style. Example of that, Canada, Australia, US, Algeria before, South Africa, and Palestine. The French did the same thing in Algeria. They consider Algeria as their extended land on the other side of the Mediterranean. They brought the French and they pushed the indigenous out. And they stayed there for 100 years. In the end, they were kicked out. Unfortunately, in this land here, we know what happened to the indigenous. By 1900, there was only left of them 250,000. It's supposed to be around 115 million people. Now, that is a genocide on a high scale. But the problem is that when it comes to indigenous people are not considered as normal people, they are terrorists or savages. Actually, the colonial British settler who, when they came to the US, they called the US in the 17th, 18th century as Israel.
Hey, you told me that. So you're saying that when the British
colonial
came,
settler, because they consider themselves, they're Protestant, consider themselves the children of Israel. Their trip during the sea is like Moses when he lost in the desert, the promised land.
so maybe this was one small group of the people who came. Certainly not the whole, because I've never heard this before.
The Protestant in general, the whole Protestants believe that this land was a promised land given to them, and they believe that they are children of Israel. And they call the indigenous as Canaanites. Canaanites is, Canaan is the name of Palestine before becoming Palestine. So there is a similarity here. The biblical myths been used from a long time to allow the European colonial settler to go around and steal any land they want to, because they are, it was given to them by God. The other people are not really worth to take this responsibility.
Yes, it's.
So, but
I heard a speaker from Palestine.
Mazin
on Pacific.ca, and I mean, I was embarrassed when I was listening to him, because our lack of education about that part of the world, it just befuddled me that I know nothing. Even after all the information we think we get, we know nothing.
The whole story, Jack, is about money, about oil, gas, and mineral. And in the case of Palestine or Syria, because Palestine, it's always been a province of a small part of a bigger motherland called Syria. And this is what they don't say about that. As I mentioned before, in Sykes-Picot in 1916, the French and the British divided Syria to 4 chunks. So it's the colonial history in order to conquer for resource. It's the story. When anybody tell you Arab and Jews conflict, and this is really stupid to say because Arab are nationality, Jews are religion. We have Arab Jews and we have, so we can now you say conflict between Arab and Jews. And when they tell you Shia or Sunni, everybody mention these these reasons or just bring these stories, they are either ignorant in the history, they know nothing about what's happening, or they have agenda to cover up for the colonial ongoing process of the theft.
So
of
the people always got along pretty well.
For I mean, this is basic in history. The Palestinian Jews and Muslim and Christian, they did not have the problem European Jews have in Germany or in France. And by the way, even when the Second World War finished, many other countries like Ukraine and Poland continued their genocide and racism toward Jews because they consider them Semites. They are not German, not Polish. No, they belong somewhere else. That's why they have to go. Like when you say now the Muslim in the US belong to Mecca or Saudi Arabia, and they have to go. And that could happen later. I mean, and now the way they are talking about Muslims,
It's terrible.
it's the same way Europeans used to talk about Jews. Did we learn anything? I mean, just take the word Muslim out and put Jews or a Christian.
Well,
and
the
see
people
if
who run the
become
world
acceptable.
learned a lot. Now they do it even better. They create anger and hatred with their lies and their media, and they try to pit us against each other.
And again, the only solution for Palestine, or I think anywhere, is to have a secular democratic state belong to all its citizens. If we have that, then the whole ideology of Zionism will be dismantled. There is no need anymore to create a Jewish state on a stolen land from indigenous people. And the Palestinians suggested that from a long time ago. So,
It's a sad story of our history and who we are. But I think we've got to do better, especially at this point in time when the whole history of the future of humanity seems to hang in the balance. We've got to do better.
there is one quote. It's from the Zionists themselves.
But we're
Oh,
give
no,
it
what?
or else give it to us in
Okay,
20
it's
seconds.
Jabotinsky said
We're out of time.
on a time. Okay, we'll do it next time. No worry.
Thank you, Mazin, and thanks for watching this segment of Citizens Forum.